Hey, great. So, Nina, welcome to the show. I am so excited to speak with you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, I want to tell everybody how I came to know about you. I had this book recommended to me. It's called Let That Shit Go. And I started reading it and I thought, I got to meet this girl. I got to meet Nina. So, Let That Shit Go is written by you and Kate Petru.
Yeah,
And I just want to talk a little bit about it. It's my bedside table book for the last few months.
l- love
Um,
that.
yeah, I know. It's what I love about it is it's bite size, like I can read a couple of pages, feel super accomplished, let that learning stew overnight, and then it's like ready for the next day and a completely new concept comes the next day. So I love how you wrote it bite size, and I love how it's written, if you don't mind me saying, in a really, we'll call it informal, casual tone. So it's really
Yeah,
approachable for people who are not into perhaps studying mindfulness or have not meditated for 10 years. This book is really digestible and approachable for that audience.
absolutely. And it was so intentional to do that because there were self-help books out there, or books on spirituality or mindfulness, meditation, but Kate and I both came from the corporate world. And, how do we distill all this for the day-to-day reality and working life and the stress and the anxiety we experience? And even the bite-sized piece, it's got 120 tips. So just as you said, you can read a little tip and then spend a week letting that sink in or try to apply it. And that was very intentional to make it very practical.
Oh, it's really, really well done. And I just wanted to ask you, you do touch on this in the book, but for the readers who haven't read it, tell me a little bit about the journey that got you to being inspired to write this book.
Yeah, it's a bit of a crazy journey, one with many ups and downs. I got into mindfulness and meditation over 25 years ago, and it's actually not the greatest story. I was 16 at the time. I lost my dad and brother very unexpectedly to a pretty severe tragedy. I faced trauma, PTSD, survivor's guilt. And as much as help I got from psychologists and child psychiatrists, I really got onto the path of studying ancient wisdom and mindfulness and meditation. And that's what really grounded me. That is the space where I could find, my inner peace again. And from there, I, finished high school, went to business school, had a great career in sales and marketing, mainly within the consumer packaged goods industry and marketing and sales. And then in 2010, kind of sparked by the corporate stress from the corporate grind, I thought to myself, something has to change. I want to do something different. I want to continue this path of study of ancient wisdom. And so I left. It took a year sabbatical. I moved to Northern California and I lived in a monastery or an ashram for a year. When
Wow.
everyone thought I was crazy because it was an economic crisis at the time, and no one was really talking about mindfulness or meditation. I mean, yoga was a thing. So off I went. It was a year I completely unplugged. So I went from being highly addicted to my Blackberry. I'm going to date myself, or Crackberry at the time they called it. Emailing. I was reporting into New York, so it was just a really stressful time for me. And suddenly I completely unplugged, and it was a phenomenal year. I came back, didn't know what quite to do. So I went back into corporate, and I realized so much of what I learned in my year off was applicable to the stresses and the worries and the anxieties that we face in the working world. Um, so from there, I launched my business quite a few years later. And I now do corporate workshops for companies in mindfulness and meditation. I've worked with over almost 50 companies now, which is really exciting. And the book came about because Kate and I started doing workshops in Toronto, and we wanted to make mindfulness and meditation really approachable. And we wanted people to feel like you don't have to go away for a year, or you don't have to go to a temple to learn. They're not intimidating processes. Anybody can learn them. And so she had this great idea of putting swear words on our workshop. So mindful AF, mindful as fuck, or learn how to fucking meditate. And they just went viral. And so from there, our publisher, HarperCollins, actually caught wind of what we were doing. And they said, we love how you're positioning this. Are you open to writing a book? Which is kind of crazy and counterintuitive, right? Because usually you write the book and then you find the publisher. But they came to us, and the rest is history, and that's how we got here. So I'm an author of this book, and I also do corporate wellness workshops.
Very cool. We're going to talk about that a little bit at the end and in the show notes for those who want to reach out to Pure Minds and learn what you're all about in your workshops. So yeah, that's really cool. Tell me, I want to unpack that year away. And did you decide you're leaving for a year, or did you was it open ended, or did you know it was going to be 1 year? I'm unpacking, I'm unplugging. Tell me about that decision. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was a 1-year course. So I knew prior to going that I was going to commit for a year. And it was my choice to completely unplug. And I told my friends and family, I said, if you want to get a hold of me, write me a letter. And I actually sent and received 150 letters that year, which is crazy. But we had monks from all around the world. We had a very strict curriculum. There were no weekends. We had to get up every day at 4:30 for meditation, and we had class all day. Like I have probably 12 thick, full notebooks full of notes from that year, and it was incredible. The amount of aha moments and just enlightenment that happened, little tidbits of it was out of this world. And my partner at the time, who's now my husband, also came with me. So it was just an incredible journey. It was an
I
incredible
can only
it was challenging. It wasn't all unicorns and rainbows. There was a lot of that, but it was also very, very challenging as well. But it,
yeah.
it was a wonderful experience, and it
Wow.
gave me permission to do what I do today, which is wonderful.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And when you came back, you did a little stint back into the corporate world, I believe, before you went
Yes.
and started Pure Minds. How did that feel going back into the corporate world? Did you feel motivated? Were you scared? Tell me about that.
Yeah, initially coming back, this was in 2011, and I was like, how do I take all this knowledge and do something with it? But it was almost like the world wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. And so one thing I was adamant about was, okay, I'm going to stay in corporate, but I was always passionate about corporate social responsibility. So I wanted to do something in cause marketing. So I actually shifted and I worked in startup. And I worked for an environmental company called TerraCycle. That's actually where Kate and I met. And so, it was almost like a transition step. Like somewhere in my mind, I was like, I'm going to get there. I don't know how I'm going to get there, when it's going to happen, but right now I need to do this. And it served me so well because working in startup, with the combination of having that corporate diligence really helped when I started my own business. So I felt really good about it. I felt exactly where I was meant to be. I was pulled in as a director of marketing, and very shortly they promoted me to the Canadian GM. And it was I had a lot of opportunity to learn how to do things from the grassroots up, which was great for my business learning. But I also feel like that small, more casual environment helped me, assert all as a leader, everything I learned. I kind of learned how to bring that into the workplace very subtly. And I had a lot more autonomy at the time. So I was able to do that.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's part of that trusting the universe that, that your things will unfold as they should. And
Yes.
it's hard when you're a business leader, in today's world where performance and being plugged in all the time, technically, to your workplace, it's hard to surrender. And sometimes we think we have control over everything. So let's
Yes.
talk about surrender. And I love how you position it in the book. Let's talk about surrender in the context of a corporate leader. Tell me
Yes.
a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it was a really tough thing for me to surrender prior to going to California. Things would happen out of my control all the time, and I would stress. And I was one of those, like, I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. and worry, and how am I going to do this? And I can't believe this happened. And then when I came back, there was like a shift that happened. And I talk in the book about, and I do this in my corporate presentations as well, about almost visualizing two buckets. I can control, I can't control. And we spend so much time in rumination on things that we can't control. A lot of those 2 a.m., 3 a.m. thoughts are things we can't control. We're trying to land a client, working on them for a year, and then suddenly they come back and say no, and it's like a heartbreak. And you can sit in that for a little bit. But I was much easily, it was easier for me to put things in the can't control bucket and just move on. And suddenly I realized we waste so much time and energy on the things we can't control. That includes, the deals we're not getting, the investors we don't land, the people that we work with. People is another big one that we can't control the people around us. And so by kind of visualizing this, okay, can I control? And I always say, if you can control 1%, go for it. Try to make that impact, try to make that change. And if you can't, then put it in the can't control bucket and let it go. And so I think that's the key is when things happen, it became very easy for me to be like, okay, we didn't land this client. Let's move on, team, versus, oh my gosh, I can't believe we didn't do that. And we worked so hard. We wasted all this time. We wasted all this money, all these resources on flights. And, I let go of all that because at that point, there is nothing you can do, right? If you've done everything you can, my mom used to say, do your best and leave the rest. And I love that because it's like, if you do your best and you've done everything you can do to get to this point and it still doesn't go, quote unquote, your way, there's nothing you can do. So you can just feel proud that you did your best and move on. And so I think that's where the surrender comes in. If there's absolutely nothing you can do about it, it's time to just surrender. And then, I had a monk say to me when I was in California that when we think about things that we can't control, they're dead thoughts. We were walking in the redwoods and he said, Nina, they're dead thoughts. And that's always stuck with me. When we ruminate and stress about the stuff that is not in our hands, it's a waste of energy. It's draining us. It's not propelling us forward in any way. So why waste time there when you can waste time on solution focused, thoughts? The faster you can put it in the bucket and let go, the faster you can focus on the solution and other alternatives. So that's how I surrender. And even in my business now, I have a very trust the universe, let go. I mean, I work hard and I do my business development, but I put everything out there and then I say, okay, let's see where this goes. And there's so much liberation around that because you don't stress anymore. You're like, okay, what's meant to happen, it's going to pan out how it's going to pan out. And that trust and surrender is very empowering, actually.
So true. And while you were saying all that, I thought about the word resistance and how, in ancient wisdom, we learn about how resistance is the cause of suffering. And it's just like you said, if you take what you can't control and you classify it as that mentally, you gain that perspective, you're almost releasing resistance to an outcome that you have no control over. And it's like that with relationships too. You're resisting someone's reaction, but you can't control their reaction. So you gotta let that shit go, just kind of separate from it and just focus on your own actions. Oh, it's such wise words. And in business, we think we have more control than we actually do.
In
right?
life, in business, in everything, we think we have. And the pandemic has been a really great lesson in all that because, I've noticed, especially in business where there's lots of A-type personalities wanting to control every little step and know how the next 10 years go. Everyone planned for 2020, but that all went to shit, right? So I always tell leaders too, I mean, it's important to plan. I'm an entrepreneur. You got to plan 2 years, 5 years, 10 years ahead. Plan, make the plan, then let go of how it's going to actually pan out. Because if someone said to me 5 years ago, when I started my business, this is what it's going to look like, I would have never imagined. Right. So I think, it's important to plan for the future. I'm not saying completely let go and trust the universe and just sit there and, you got to plan, you got to, put the, future together, in some sort of formal way. You got to, take care of your P&L and whatnot, but then you let go because you just don't know how things are going to, whether it's in a work setting or the pandemic or people related, there is just so much we can't control.
It's so true. It's so true. Let's talk about perspective again when it comes to the way what we think about things. In the book, you have some gems around micro versus macro thinking. What is
Yeah.
that, and how can we use it?
Yeah. So my whole take on perspective is that, think of a funnel. So the words we use in the book are micro and macro. So think of a funnel. At the bottom of the funnel is the micro perspective. At the top of the funnel is the macro perspective. And not to our faults, but we tend to wake up every day in the micro, right? Got to get my kids to school, got to, have these meetings, got to prep for that presentation, got to find matching socks. Like we're in our own little bubbles, right? And we tend to wake up, check our phones is the first thing we do. And then suddenly we're into stress mode, or we're comparing because of something online, or, even on LinkedIn, tend to compare, or we're stressed because we're all these emails behind. The more we can have macro perspective thinking, and this is big picture thinking, I'm grateful I've got food, shelter, water. I've got a job to pay me. I live in a, maybe an affluent um, situation. I have family. Like there are a million things to be grateful for, but we lose sight of that when we're sitting in the micro. We just suddenly go into stress, anxiety, worry mode. And that's reality. Like it's okay to have those, and there's a purpose for that. But the more we can have thoughts of the macro, the less we stress about the micro. And I'm going to be vulnerable here and give you, like, how the shift happened for me. When I was working for TerraCycle, when I was working in startup, I never had such a senior role and so much responsibility. And the same week that I got that role, my mom was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's, or ALS.
Mm.
Obviously, like a huge shock. She was my best friend, my biggest supporter and cheerleader. Like that was just a complete heartbreak. And she passed away 2 years to her diagnosis.
Mm.
But in those 2 years, I had never been so successful in my career, which you think it'd be the opposite because I was dealing with all the stress at home. But
Mm.
it gave me perspective. So, I wouldn't think twice about reaching to the global CEO if I had a question. I wouldn't question the emails I sent out. I would send them out and be like, this is what I think is best for the business, blah, blah, blah. I
Mm.
wouldn't go home. Previously I'd be like, oh my gosh, should I have said that? Did I
Mm.
overspeak? Is someone going to be upset that I wrote that? Yeah, how are they going to react? All the questions. That was gone because any extra thought I had about work was about my mom.
Mm.
How much time do I have left with her? My whole ride home wasn't thinking about work. It was, I got to get home, spend as much time with her as I can. We're going to do this today. Like, what ability has she lost today? I started being grateful for just being able to get up and have a shower, get up and go for a walk, like all the things she was losing, the ability to do. I suddenly had this macro perspective gratitude. Like, how often do we wake up and we're like, oh, I'm just happy to wake up and be healthy. I'm happy to have access to food, shelter, water. We don't think like that. So
Mm.
that really helped in my, catapult my success because I wasn't in my own head anymore. I had a sticky note in my office that said, get yourself out of the way. Because I realized we do it to ourselves, right? We question ourselves, or we make a decision and then we were not sure if we should have done X, Y, and Z. And so when you have macro perspective, it cultivates gratitude, but it also gets you to stop worrying about such the nitty gritty
Mm.
level of worry that we can get into, which prevents our decision making ability, or prevents our focus, it prevents our awareness, how we lead. It just trickles into a number of things when it comes to business. So perspective and that macro, having that macro perspective can really create that resiliency that you need at work,
Mm.
especially as a leader.
Yeah, and you do touch on your mom quite a bit in the book, and
Mm-hmm.
her wisdom, that you
Oh,
carry on. Yeah, amazing. And just everything about your relationship sounds so special, and the ability to draw those boundaries. I was thinking about what you said with respect to working really hard and not being almost fearless at work, because you have
yes.
these boundaries that you exist within at work. And then when you leave because you have so
Right.
much else going on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also when you're dealing with life and death, what is a P&L?
What
I mean,
is, uh,
and that's the bigger perspective that we all have to keep in mind. And that's something I learned at a young age, losing my brother and dad at 16 overnight, very unexpectedly. live every day to the fullest, enjoy life. Like, yes, work is important. Yes, all of that plays a role, but have the perspective that, hey, I'm alive, I'm able-bodied, I can do this work, and that will make you fearless, right? Because you have nothing to lose then if you're coming from that place all the time.
Yeah, yeah, that inherent fearlessness. And it's not about not feeling your feelings, it's about feeling
Yes,
them fully. Fearlessness around feeling your bad feelings too, fully, right?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
So wise. So you're so busy, like you've got, you're running a business, you're a mom of a young kid, there's lots going on, you're in the city, stuff's happening. How do you personally create, tricks and tips in your own life, everyday tips? Like if we're talking to entrepreneurs that are so
Yeah.
busy, is there a few things that you do during the day that you could share that help you stay kind of grounded?
Yeah, I mean, I've got 120 in the book. But yes, for my own practice, I do try to meditate in the mornings. There's a whole chapter in the book on meditation. Again, it's very casual. It's not like you must meditate for 2 hours every morning. If you have 30 seconds, just close your eyes and take a few deep breaths. So I try to meditate in the morning. I don't judge my practice. I do have a little one, so sometimes, when I wake up in the morning, I get 2 minutes to meditate. Sometimes I get half an hour to meditate. Um, Meditation is like going to the gym for your mind. So, we put so much focus on this body of ours, like what we wear and what we eat and going to the gym and all that. But how often are we taking inventory of what's going on up here? So that's what meditation does. It gives you quiet time with just you and your mind. So you can train it to, what to do with these challenging thoughts and what to do when you're faced with anxiety and stress. And then throughout the day, it's mindfulness. Mindfulness is the applied version of, how am I going to find, peace and happiness in my everyday.
Mm,
And I feel like every moment is an opportunity to practice mindfulness, to be in the here and now, to be present. I really try to compartmentalize. When I'm at work, I'm at work. When I'm, with my daughter, I'm with my daughter. And I, obviously thoughts from work seep in and she catches me on my phone here and there, but I really try to make an effort to, when I'm with her, I'm with her. When I'm doing me time, I'm doing me time, and honoring all that. So I think compartmentalizing really, really helps with the stress, or not feeling like, the biggest thing I'm hearing from clients right now is their work and home lines are so blurred since the
mm,
pandemic. So that's one thing I do. But overall, I just try to be very aware of my thoughts. I mean, that's what
mm,
mindfulness is all about. And that's why the first chapter is called awareness, because
mm,
we think on average 60,000 thoughts a day, which is 35 to 42 thoughts a minute. And we're aware of less than 1% of them. So much of our, and 80, a study just came out that said 80% of our thoughts are said to be self-deprecating or negative. So, you know, it's all about, do you control the mind or does it control you? And it's
mm,
this constant battle. And I've been practicing this for 25 years and it's still, every day there's still an opportunity for me to be like, oh, no, your mind's going there. No, 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 no. Bring it back. And we have, techniques in the book on how to do that. And that's, what I talk about in my workshops. But if we can just be aware of what's going on in here and let go of the things that are not working for us, that are not allowing us to show up as our best self, that's half the battle, the awareness
mm.
of it.
It's so true. Catching, almost like catching it when it's
Catching it.
happening. I
Yeah.
like I like how you described compartmentalizing, laser focus.
Yes.
One of the things I struggle with in my day is I've got my phone here, I've got two screens in front of me, there's stuff going on in the house, if the kids are home from school, whatever. And so this idea of finishing a task before
Yes.
you're checking the next, and I'm trying to do that more where I'm putting my phone on its face while
Good.
I'm focusing on a task, but it's hard and we are expected to be almost, society has created these monsters around expectation that we answer emails really quick, or
Oh,
we also have chat apps now at work. It's
it's
not just
crazy.
email, there's chat, so you can be reached at any time of day or night.
Yeah. Some of my clients, they've got email, they have chat, and everybody has everyone's cell phone number. So I do coaching as well, like when I'm on coaching, and I ask people, like, how do you expect to have balance when anyone can access you at any time? You know, and it's true. And that's why there's all these blurred lines. But when it comes to the compartmentalization, not even just like, okay, during the day is work and the evening is with my family. If you're with your family and suddenly, you know, you do get an email that you do have to respond to at night, in the evening, you know, don't do it at the dinner table where everyone's sitting and talking, and, you know, get some quiet time. Just say, hey, I need 15 minutes. And even that level of compartmentalization. So when you're doing the task, you're laser focused on it, you're more efficient. The other thing I do is you know, there's a chapter in the book on finding your tech zen. And I talk about a study that was done by a U of M professor that said um, companies are now losing 20 to 30% of efficiency because we are so highly distracted.
Mhm.
And couple that with another study that we talk about where it takes 25 minutes to get into a state of flow,
Yes.
right? It takes 25 minutes to access the most creative, strategic parts of your brain. Yet we are getting interrupted every 11 minutes on average by a
Mhm.
text, by an email. So I'm big on, I always tell people, if you're working on a big strategic deck, close everything. And I did this at TerraCycle. I told my team, yay, I'm working on a deck. I need 2 hours. I'm not going to be available by email. Don't come and talk to me. And I would turn my phone off. I would close my email. My CEO at the time loved these big 200 slide decks, and I would just do the deck. And that's the only thing I would do. Your output's going to be stronger. You know, the access to the creative parts, as I said, or strategic parts of your brain are going to be, you know, a lot higher. And so, you know, this whole notion of constant interruption is working against us. It's working
Mhm.
against companies when we're like, ping, 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 ping. How can anyone get anything done?
Mhm.
So I really encourage people to do that in with my corporate clients. It's book off chunks of time where you're just working, and even maybe even talk to your manager about it and say, hey, every Friday and Monday from 9 to 12, I will not be answering email because I'm going to be working on this, the big stuff that you're asking of
Yeah,
me.
your get shit done blocks in your calendar,
Exactly.
right? And you know, one of the things that I struggle with when I'm talking to my team sometimes is convincing them that this balance, these boundaries is actually going to make them more productive at work.
Yes.
And that is the hard part because they see a text at night and they want to reply right away. They think they're going to get brownie points if the CEO asks a question and they answer within 5 minutes. And
Yeah.
really, you know, really, like you said, that if we have balance, we have a juicier brain. We can access those parts of our brain
Yes.
that aren't tired and that are creative and problem solving. And so those vicious boundaries around balance are essential for leadership and for your, you know, your progress and your success at work. And that's the tricky part to convince, especially startups, right? Startups,
Yes.
you
The
remember,
culture.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
It's
like,
intense.
yeah, it's not 8 hour days. That's not how it goes.
No, no,
And
it's not.
so, yeah. So how do you change that culture? How do you, you know, as a leader, how do you lead by example, but also convince people that you will be more productive if you actually have a life outside of work? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the key is leading by example because all the leaders that I work with, I tell them, you know, if you're emailing your team at, you know, 2 o'clock in the morning, you're not setting the stage. Even if you're like, oh, I don't expect them to respond. Psychologically, they're going to feel like they need to. I've been there. I know, I get it. You know, they're going to, unless they have very strict boundaries for themselves. So I also am a huge advocate of activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So taking time for yourself, doing something you love where you kind of lose yourself, whether that's, you know, strumming a guitar, going to the gym, doing a yoga class, painting, like watching Netflix. You know, I tell clients relaxing is productive because if you spend half an hour at night or an hour at night doing you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which puts your body in a state of relaxation. You're going into bed like that. You're going to have a better sleep. You're going to wake up more refreshed versus when your sympathetic nervous system is activated, like back in caveman days, this is when we were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. And it
Mhm.
was practical, it served a purpose. Now our sympathetic nervous system is activated all the time, whether it's, you know, work stress or an argument with someone or externalities, the pandemic, the fight for social justice. There's so much going on in the world right now. And so we're constantly having our sympathetic nervous system activated. And when we're like that, we're all jittery and stressed. Oh my God, and 14 emails behind. how can we think strategically? How can we think productively? We can't. So just taking that hour for yourself, then not checking your email before bed, like going to bed like that and waking up. And I see my clients, I see the shift in them. You have to almost have the courage and the strength to do it, to apply it, believe in it, give it a month and watch the shift. Like just watch the
Mhm.
shift. And like I said, at TerraCycle, I was most successful than I had ever been. And out of 23 countries, Canada was the most, the most profitable. And I went home and I didn't work for a minute because I spent every possible minute I could with my mom. So I
Mhm.
became so efficient at work because of that.
No, it's such good advice. I want to talk about I want to talk about generations to come. So what I'm noticing is we have people in their 20s today that are coming into the
Mhm.
workplace and they're looking around and they want to make an impact, either a social or an environmental impact. They want their
Mhm.
work to mean something. There's that. But I'm also
Yes.
seeing, I don't know if you're seeing this too, but I'm also seeing there's like a demand around balance starting to come
Yes,
up, which I
for sure.
love.
I
And
love it.
yeah, me too. And I'm looking at that and I'm saying, how can we learn from that in our generation, but also promote that up so that, they're not being penalized. These people coming into the workforce, not being penalized or labeled as lazy. I love what they're doing.
Right.
And I think, honestly, I think mindfulness and meditation is starting to trickle its way down
Oh
into
yeah.
younger generations now. Yeah. Yeah, which is really
Yes,
cool.
definitely. And I think they have it right. And I also want to kind of call out that it's no longer apples to apples, because that older generation at work, um, when they started, everybody had computers. Nobody had iPhones or smartphones. Nobody had BlackBerry. So when you shut down, right? And now we're in this space where we're hyper connected. So I feel like people have every right to be like, I need balance. I can't be connected to work 24/7. So I think it's about educating the leaders on, when you do have balance and when you do make that space, you promote happy employees, more productive employees, more strategic employees. You improve retention because you're not working the shit out of them. And we need that. We've gone too far. Like if you look at, especially in North America, right? If you look at countries like I think the study came out a few days ago of the happiest countries in the world. Like a lot of European countries like Denmark and whatnot. It's like they have a rule that in Denmark that they don't email in June, all of June. It's like, or like in Canada, we have a year and a half maternity leave. In the States, they have like 6 weeks or something. So there is not enough prioritization on self, and that's when people get burnout. They're exhausted. You're not getting the best out of them. So I think it's about educating leaders that providing your team with balance is only going to help. And I experience this too. I'm a huge advocate of unplugging on vacation, and I told my team, if I hear from you, I'm going to be pissed. Like, I don't want to hear from you. You
Good.
better be on the beach drinking those cocktails, relaxing. And the cool thing is, it's not like you shut off from work when you're on vacation. You're still thinking about it, but because you're not in the day to day, suddenly some really cool big ideas start to flourish when you're sitting on that beach, because you're more strategic, because you have access to that creative part of your brain. And I noticed people who were coming back from vacation who had been working were tired, pissed off because they were using work time to, paid vacation time to work. People who were coming back who unplugged, refreshed, new ideas. So you see it in your team once you start kind of implementing these certain rules around balance. And I do whole workshops on tech balance because it's become such a thing.
It really has. And like I said, in this culture of go, 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 speed, 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 beat the other guys.
Yes,
Yeah. And how do we change that? It has to be from the top down. And it really has to be leading by example, which is so tricky because it's a big cultural shift for ourselves.
it is.
But technology can help you. Even if you are working on a Saturday, you can time the email to go out on a Monday, if
Monday.
you must, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I spoke to one of my clients. is the CMO of this company, and she said, I want people to unplug because I want the junior people to step up while people are gone. So sometimes like the leader is saying it, but we're still not listening, right? So if the leader or the culture is advocating for it, hold them to it, and one by one, it takes like a whole team to start, applying those rules. Because if just one person starts emailing on Saturday, or it just, creates this whole thing. So it's really about honoring the boundary.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about a, a closing thought on meditation. So we're talking to business leaders. They don't have time to meditate, or they think they don't have time to meditate. The idea that the myth around meditation, let's unpack that. How can we create that superpower that you described of catching our thoughts and being aware of our thoughts without sitting and humming for an hour a day? What does that look like?
Yeah. So in terms of, so I'll answer those are almost two questions. So in terms of meditation myths, the biggest question or thing I get said to me is, I can't meditate because my thoughts don't stop, Nina. And my response back is, your thoughts aren't going to stop. You think 60,000 thoughts a day. They're not going to magically stop because you're sitting in a lotus position and wanting to meditate. I've been meditating for 17 years now, and I've never had a meditation where one thought or 20 thoughts or 200 thoughts hasn't seeped through. And the other thing about meditation I say is, don't judge your practice. There's no such thing as a good or bad meditation. The fact that you sat there and quieten your mind, or tried to quiet your mind, or wasn't distracted with anything else, is wonderful, and you have to celebrate that, not judge it. And then and also the second part of your question, sorry, which was, losing my train of thought here. Oh, the how to control the mind. And so we have this technique in the book, and I also learned this, while I was in the ashram. But think of your mind as having two parts. So one part of your mind is the chatty mind. I'm giving you the exact summary here. The chatty mind, and this is the mind we are so often associated with, right? A lot of people refer to it as the monkey mind, right? Going from branch to branch to branch, or thought to thought to thought. This is the mind that thinks these 60,000 thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people who struggle with anxiety, they think they are their thoughts, right? Their thoughts become such a part of them. And I always say, this is a cheesy analogy, but it's like, think of yourself as the depths of the ocean, and your thoughts are just the waves. They're impermanent, they're coming, they're going, they merge back into the ocean. They're just a small part of you. And so when you have all these thoughts, you want to lean into the other part of your mind, which is the observing mind. And everybody has access to this. The observing mind works like a muscle. And the more you lean into it, the more you're going to be able to leverage it. But what it does is it just observes what you're thinking about. There I go stressing about work again. There I go wondering what I'm going to make for dinner. There I go really upset about that person. It doesn't have any emotion attached. It just observes. It's a witness to the thoughts. So the second your observing mind can step in and notice that, you're sitting there, staring into space and just thinking about this thing that is stressing out so much, it can pull you out. Because you use the observing mind to say stop. And I also say, treat your mind like a child. Treat the chatty mind like a child, or give it a name even. So when it starts running off, it's like, okay, Johnny, we're not doing that today. Like, give it a name. So it creates a little bit of space and detachment from your thoughts. And it's such an empowering tool, because the more and then from there, when you notice that you're not present, you can be present. You take a deep breath, you get back to the deck you're working on. I think it was Eckhart Tolle that said, the moment you realize you're not present, you're present. So it's just building that awareness muscle of the observing mind to notice. And you'll be shocked. Once you start doing that, you'll be like, oh my God, I cannot believe all the places my mind runs. Because we're physically present often, but our minds are rarely there, right? We're doing the dishes, we're thinking about work, we're sitting at work, we're thinking about the home renovation. So the whole goal is to be right where you are, like mind and body. Because usually it's, yeah.
It's so true. And when you start, for me, I also started quite a few years ago, back in 2008 is when I started a mindfulness practice. And what I noticed was I was big high performer at work, super busy, taking on a lot. I loved my ego. My ego was my thing. And people would come and chat, but I would keep my hands on the keyboard and be like, what do you want to
Mm,
talk to me about? I'm really busy. But once I started bringing mindfulness and practice into my life, I would like turn my chair to face them and give them complete focus. And it actually helped my relationships at work.
yes.
It helped me feel better at the end of the day. I was less of an asshole. I
Yes.
was more into building relationships and connections with humans at work. And it didn't take away from my productivity, it juiced my productivity. And so
Yes.
even just little things like you think you're wasting time, you're not. If you're fully present with a human being, you are not
Yes.
wasting time ever. That's what life's about. It's about connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk about, mindful listening in some of my workshops as well, because especially because now you're in a meeting when everyone's gone remote, especially, you're in a meeting, but you're on your phone, you're checking your email, so I do a whole thing on mindful listening. And, the difference between hearing and listening is, you can hear music in the background, you can hear the TV, you can hear, but mindful listening is when you're fully present and paying attention to what the other person is saying. And once you cultivate that skill set, your relationships change, how you're digesting information changes, because naturally you're paying more attention. So you're going to have more questions, right? Well, what about this? What if we looked at finance and did that? Versus being in a meeting, but then you're emailing and you're half there and half not. And I've seen clients reduce the amount of meetings they've had because they're just mindfully listening. So more gets done, we're more productive. So I can totally see how you had that shift of once you were just present everywhere, it affected your efficiency in a really good way. Because that's what happens. Because we're not here, there, and everywhere. We're just here and now. And we focus and we get that little thing done. And then we go on to the next thing, we get that thing done versus everything half ass.
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. So these are all super gems. And, can I know you're in Toronto. So let's talk about Pure Minds. How can people reach you? Is there a virtual option for our teams in the West? Can tell us about your company and how we can get a hold of you.
Yeah, so you can find everything on ninapurewal.com. You can find all about my corporate workshops. All of my workshops are customized. I work with the teams to understand their objectives. You can catch my book on there. I've also got a kids podcast. I'm doing some stuff with kids and kids meditations. But definitely virtual is actually, interestingly enough, all I have done since the pandemic. And, at first I thought, oh my gosh, all these conferences I had booked, got canceled. But then, it ended up being that suddenly there were no borders because we're all online. So virtual is an option. We're starting to lift the restrictions in Canada. So in person is an option. But I mainly do customized workshops. I like the workshop portion because this is very subtle content. When you think about the P&L and revenue and all that stuff, you don't think about this kind of stuff on the day to day. So I like the workshop because I try to make it interactive. There's exercises because I find the only way to internalize what I'm talking about is to do the exercises and really understand how it's affecting you in your life. So you can find everything on ninapurewal.com. I pick my poison with social media. So I'm on LinkedIn at Nina Purewal and I'm on Instagram at nina.pure.minds.
Got it. I'll put all this in the show notes for people so they can get a hold of
Awesome.
you. Your work is so important. It's timely, and I think it will change the world. I do. I think people need
Aw,
these types of skills. They need to know about this secret superpower that we all have, not just in business, but in our personal lives. So thank you
yeah.
so much for taking the time to chat. And
Thank you.
I really want to stay connected. And thanks for the work that you do and for this amazing book. Let that shit go.
Aw, thanks, Melanie. I so appreciate it. I so appreciate you having me on the show today. I loved your questions. I think they're great. And yeah, that is my goal to have people, through adversity, find some peace and happiness in the everyday. So thank you, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Take care and we'll chat soon.
You too.